Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is Jess. So Jess, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Awesome. So I'm Jess Davidoff, and I live in Sag Harbor, New York, and I'm the founder and CEO of a new snack food brand called Cobb.
So yeah, I'm curious about Cobb. Like, what kind of snack food is it, and how did you get the idea for it?
So I have had a very winding journey to becoming a food founder. This is actually my sixth company. So entrepreneurship is not new for me, but food is definitely new. So the first decade of my career, I had launched and sold 3 tech startups in various kind of industries. And then the second decade of my career, I spent as a successful turnaround CEO for consumer and celebrity-led brands. And during that time, I was navigating really intense medical problems with my older son. He had a host of issues. So all of his hair fell out, his nails peeled completely off. He was waking up most nights in the middle of the night in like excruciating pain, vomiting everywhere, was not growing or gaining weight, had like painful eczema that would bleed, required surgery, like so many things. I went to all these amazing doctors in Manhattan, and everyone told me that they couldn't figure it out. And they also told me that I was crazy when I told them that I thought it was food related, because all of these problems started when I stopped breastfeeding and started introducing food. And so since nobody could help us, I just started to take matters into my own hands and started to track everything he ate. And one day I added corn to a dish that had never given him problems, and he had a full-blown allergic reaction. And it turns out he is allergic to corn. And I slowly started to learn about how prevalent corn is in the American food system. So we have 1,800 corn derivatives in America. So citric acid, the riboflavin added to wheat products, the vitamin D added to most dairy products, all of that is derived from corn. So I essentially became like trad mom at night, making my own bagels and ice cream and breadcrumbs, and CEO by day. And during that time where I was doing one of these turnarounds, I said to myself, I'm going to launch a brand so that at some point I can feed my son something packaged, because it was just crazy. Like I couldn't feed him anything from the store. And so that was where the kind of wheels started turning about what I wanted to launch. And then when I really started to like dive into what the first product was, I started to think like, what's going to make a splash? Like if I launch corn-free cookies, nobody's going to really care, because I don't think most people even know that there's corn in every cookie. But if I launch something like corn-free popcorn, like that would be cool. And so popcorn happens to be my favorite snack food. So I went to this international grocery store in Manhattan, and I bought all these grains and I started popping them. And most grains, when you pop them, they kind of taste more like a bad rice cake. And then I found this grain, sorghum, and it pops just like corn. It looks just like popcorn, and it tastes just like popcorn, and it's just so much better for you and the planet than popcorn. And then that was how I knew that that was going to be what we launched with. And, I just fell in love with the grain and knew that that was what I wanted to build a whole company around, this amazing ancient grain that originated in Africa, but that we actually grow here in America now.
In terms of actually manufacturing this product, obviously that you were doing it like yourself in your kitchen at first, but what does that process kind of look like for you to find a good partner, or are you still making it yourself?
No. So when I first started, I was making it in my own kitchen, giving it out to friends, letting, my family try it. And most people were like frightened, because they would come into my home. They knew my son was allergic to corn, and they'd see this popcorn and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, no, it's not made from corn. And it was just kind of like this shock. But yeah, so then when I knew I wanted to kind of have bigger plans, I started to find what's called a co-packer, which is someone who can take your recipes from home, commercialize them on big machinery, and package them into bags that you can use to sell in various stores. And so I literally just went on Google and created a list of, hundreds of co-packers who specialize in popped snacks, and just went down the list and just started calling each one, asking if they'd work with sorghum instead of corn. And 2 out of 100 said that they would. So yeah, so we started recipe testing with them, and here we are. And so we did a really small test launch this summer in the Hamptons at a couple of farmers markets, just to make sure my friends weren't kind of like being nice and telling me everything was yummy. And it sold out in 6 weeks. Like, I thought it would last us like 4 months. It sold out so fast. And we did another production run and just launched it on our website in January.
So in terms of like finding that co-packer, yeah, 'cause that's kind of what I figured, that like it would be very difficult because you're creating this new category essentially where it's never been done before. And to actually get somebody to agree to do something that's so different from what they've done for so many years is obviously a big challenge.
Yeah, so we're actually doing the production like a little bit differently than most popcorn companies. Most popcorn is actually popped in oil. So you're like heating up the oil and kind of popping it with the oil. The way we're doing it is we're actually air popping it on our farm, and then we're just seasoning it with the oil, which for us is actually better. And it's how I was making it in my kitchen, because when you heat up oil, it loses some of its antioxidative properties. And so for us, we wanted to kind of like keep it all like as close to how I made it in my kitchen as possible. And so that's kind of how we're making it now. But it's really just like that, like day one thinking, because food is so new to me. So we're questioning everything, and it's a new grain for a lot of these co-manufacturers. But I think there's a lot out there who are like excited about solving problems and trying new things.
So in terms of your vision for the product, obviously you said that you just launched it like in January on your website. So do you view it as more of like a direct to consumer product, or retail, or even like you could say food service, like movie theaters? Like, where do you kind of see your product being here like the next year or two?
I would say for the next year, like 2025 is definitely going to be direct to consumer. And for us, we define direct to consumer as both our website as well as Amazon. So we just kind of turned the switch on to our Amazon store today. And we haven't even announced it publicly, but it's we're going to roll it out over the next couple of weeks. And so that's going to be our real focus for this year, as well as select specialty stores that are just great, marketing positioning. And then 2026 is really where we want to focus on grocery, starting mainly with the natural channel, but expanding obviously, nationwide into mainstream grocers eventually, because we really do believe that when you create a product that is really tasty, that it shouldn't just be for like people who shop at Whole Foods. It should be, people shopping everywhere, Target, Walmart, anywhere, because if it's tasty, then I think everybody should have access to it.
So in terms of some of like the health benefits, like obviously, taste is important, but is it only for people who have an allergy, or are there other benefits for people who might be consuming regular popcorn today?
No, so it's like the same way that people who don't have gluten allergies will still have, quinoa in their pantry, even though they can eat, pasta. Like, I personally believe that it's best for anyone, regardless of your dietary restrictions, to just eat it as diverse an array of foods as possible. So for me, I always also try to eat as nutrient dense foods as possible. And so if you're comparing like corn-free popcorn made from our popped sorghum to regular popcorn, the health benefits are so much more vast with sorghum, because it is a very nutrient rich food, and it's actually anti-inflammatory, whereas corn is inflammatory. So sorghum is a grain that has tons of these antioxidants called polyphenols, which are found in foods like blueberries, or, red wine has a lot of them. And so you really do want to consume a lot of those because they're so good for you. They're anti-cancer, anti-diabetes. And the other thing that's great about sorghum compared to corn and other grains is the glycemic index. So you know how you eat like a gummy bear and you're super like off the rails, and then you have this crash? That's because it's like that sugar spike. Sorghum has the lowest glucose of all grains, so it just keeps you full for a really long time. So it's really good for like, you want a yummy snack, but like it's actually going to keep you full until your next meal, or like even if you have to skip a meal, it'll really keep you, because it's not going to spike your blood sugar. So that's another great thing. And then for me, some people don't care, but I really do because I have little kids, but sorghum is really great for the environment. So it has this deep root system that sequesters carbon, and it's really great for soil biodiversity. And unlike other grains and crops like almonds and corn, it doesn't require any water aside from rainfall. So, especially now, with the wildfires, it's really something that we should be considering in terms of the crops that we're growing. So it really has just like an incredible environmental and sustainability footprint as well.
So in terms of like these value propositioning and your messaging, because obviously, I mean, being on this show, super easy to kind of like share that with our audience. But in terms of sharing it with people when you're on shelves or online or even at the farmers markets, how do you kind of get that message across to consumers who aren't aware of these facts about your products?
Yeah, it's so challenging because you basically just have like front and back of bag to convey all of these things. And so in my, when I think about it, it's like, okay, the front of the bag has to do kind of two things. It has to make you stop in the aisle so that you pause to look at it. So it has to be visually appealing and bright colors and eye-catching. So that's kind of number one. And number two, once they stop and go over to the bag, it has to be intriguing enough for them to flip it over. So for us, I trademarked the phrase corn-free popcorn instead of, only having pop sorghum. Because when I was at farmers markets, I tried out two kinds of messaging. Like, do you want to try some pop sorghum? Or do you want to try some corn-free popcorn? And far and away, the corn-free popcorn, everyone was like, oh, what is that? And then it's like, that's all you need to do. You just need to like reel them in. And so the corn-free popcorn angle, for me was what made me think like, oh, if someone knows that they like popcorn, then they're more inclined to try something that's just a corn-free version of something that they like versus trying this random food that they probably have never heard of. And so that to me was like the thing that would like get them to flip the bag over. And then on the back of the bag is where we're really talking about the origin story. So it's not just like, I'm someone who just wants to launch a brand and make money. It's like, no, this is like deeply personal. And I really had nothing to feed my children aside from, homemade bagels. And the benefits of sorghum and the benefits to the environment. So we kind of like tried to hit on those in addition to obviously having the nutrition panel and our ingredients.
That's awesome. So,
but it's a lot. You have a really small,
yeah, it's a very small packaging. And on top of that, like, to your point, when it's in retail, there's a very short window when people are going to actually go and look at these things. So it's like, to your point, how do you kind of capture those consumers in a very short amount of time? It's always a question for testing and figuring that out. So in terms of your brand, right? Like if we're going to have this conversation again in 1 year from now, where do you see things going for your brand?
I would love, so in a year from now, the dream would be to have launched in a national grocer. So we'd be on shelves and to have launched additional sorghum-based products aside from the pop sorghum. So we have kind of two product lines that we're sort of working on in parallel. Like one group is the on-the-go snacks. So like our popcorn, puffs, things that you'd pack with you on the go. And then we have these pantry staples. So like whole grain sorghum, which you could boil like a quinoa or a farro, as well as kind of like other things like pasta and flours and baking mixes.
For sure. And obviously you have not been doing it for that long. But I'm just curious, if you could go back in time to before you even decided to launch this brand, what is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew?
I would say I wish I knew that about like bringing someone on who is like very specialized in food packaging. Because when you design, like I've been the CEO of a number of consumer brands in the home goods, spirits, clothing, accessories, jewelry, like you name it, like I've done it. I've never done food. And so when you're talking with creative agencies and you fall in love with certain creative agencies and you vibe with them in terms of design and branding and creative, it's so important to have someone who's actually designed a packaging for food, because the way that the machines work in food to actually produce them off the line is so specific that when you're designing them, there's all these things that like if you were a food packaging designer, you'd be like, oh yeah, well duh, like I know that already. But if you actually are just working with like a generalist creative agency, they would never know. And so packaging errors are so costly because your whole run gets ruined. And so you either have to say, okay, we're going to have this packaging that, doesn't look perfect, or, scrap it and just use it for sampling. So yeah, I think for food, with this particular company, I think having people who are like very highly specialized is so important. And I wish I knew that before we did our first run.
Yeah, it's good advice. And yeah, exactly. I think it's, when you're printing something on packaging, it's very different than any other kind of design. And as you said, you only have like a certain amount of space there. So yeah, it's super important. So like on that note, if somebody's watching this and they wanted to reach out to you or to buy your products, do you mind sharing your social media and website? I guess best ways to get in contact.
Yeah, so all of our channels is just Cobb Foods, so COBFOODS. So that's .com, and that's our Instagram, our TikTok, our Twitter, everything. And that's the best way of reaching us. Our email is on our website with a contact form if you have kind of a longer message. But I read all of our DMs and all of our LinkedIn messages and everything, because the brand is really, such a personal kind of journey, and also a celebration of like finding out the root cause of all of my son's problems, having them disappear, and kind of like making something with him, and also with my second son, who's also allergic to corn, which is crazy. And doing something that they feel excited about and proud of.
So it's cobbfoods.com, right? I think it's your website.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jess, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome.